So much has happened in the last 24 hours. I'm so stressed and I barely slept since I discovered that Jamie was missing. It's starting to make me feel a little twitchy, but I thought I'd better update you guys. I was overwhelmed by all the suggestions you guys gave me, and I've taken more than a few of them on board. I'm definitely going to be getting a huge planter full of sage for the balcony. I did spill a little salt in my doorway, but I'm sorry to disappoint. That didn't help at all. There's nothing I'm following quite like Miss Hemming's rules. I followed them to the letter so far, and lo and behold, I'm still alive. And that's not to say it hasn't been tough. I'll start from the beginning. I was going crazy, and a few hours after my last post, Jamie still hadn't returned. He had been gone for almost 24 hours. His work has called me multiple times, and I don't know what to say, so I keep ghosting the calls. I was bang in the middle of danger time when I decided that checking the lift had to be my first step, but I wasn't gonna break that rule. I waited desperately for 3:34 to come, and I'm ashamed to say that when it did, I remained paralyzed to a sofa for almost half an hour before I found the nerve to leave the flat. It was 4:02 when I finally reached the lift. The lift in this building is old and rickety. It hasn't been updated in a very long time, and has likely been here as long as the building. Its big, clunky buttons stared back at me as I glared at them, hoping for some sort of answer or clue. My heart thumped and I was overcome with a feeling of dread, but nothing came of it. I was hopeless. I stepped inside the lift, rode it up and down a few floors, searched the entire perimeter with a phone torch for anything I could find. I found nothing. Jamie had completely disappeared. Sobbing and exhausted, I rolled back to the floor 7 and turned my key into flat 42. The perfect home that felt like anything but home at that point. I was sitting between reading all your comments and contemplating pause. Sobbing and exhausted, I rolled back to floor 7 and turned my key into flat 42. The perfect home that felt like anything but home at that point. I sat at the cheap flat pack dining table and managed to put together on move-in day and cried, my hands shaking as I held my phone. I was flitting between reading all your comments and contemplating calling the police for an hour, but I decided to call my friend Georgia instead. I needed a real person here. Things were so crazy, and I wasn't sure if the police would be able to help with the little information I had. But I knew I needed to sound out with someone. I'll spare you the details again. But I told her everything, and she promised she'd be with me in the late morning since she had to take her younger brother to the school. I waited anxiously, not before arming every room exactly as advised, but before I knew it, I looked at the clock and it was 8:23. I had around half an hour until the postman was due to show up, and there was no way I was missing him today. I stood by the door looking vacantly at the wood, like someone in a film who was possessed. The exhaustion was really settling in, but Jamie was all that I could think of. Pure adrenaline was keeping me standing. And at 8:52 I opened the door. The next 2 minutes were the longest of my life, but when I saw him, a wave of relief swept my entire body. Right on cue, 8:54, the postman, Ian Flanders, stood in front of me, a smile that barely hid his concern covering his younger than expected face. He didn't look old enough to be in the postman for over 35 years, but I was too distracted by the answers I needed from him to care. "You must be the lieutenant," he stated, but in a way that it sounded like a question. I struggled with my answer, so I got straight to the point. "Miss Hemmings left me a note. She said to speak to you if..." Can I come in, dear? I think we need to chat. I ushered Ian in, my hands still shaking as I flapped him in the direction of the sofa, gesturing for him to sit down. I shoved the now slightly crumpled note in his lap and waited. I'm glad Prue still thinks that highly of me. I will miss that old girl, he said with a coy smile as he reached the end of the note. Can you help me or not? I had no time for his ego trip on a moved-on neighbor. I can help, but I can't stop for long, so it'll have to be quick. I've walked these halls delivering posts for 40 years. I've seen it all, everything Prue's mentioned and more. What do you need to know? He said. Ian was nothing like I had expected. The note made me feel like he was going to be a kindly old granddad figure, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Postman Ian spoke with a thick city accent and wore a heavy gold chain around his tattooed neck. He had dyed his graying roots. Boot had polished black. His demeanor was thankfully non-threatening, but extraordinary His demeanor was thankfully non-threatening, but extraordinarily cocky. He was the sort of man I imagined in a betting shop, rubbing his grubby hands on notes as he bragged over a win. He didn't ask as he lit a cigarette in my living room, and I didn't question it. We would usually smoke outside, but I wasn't gonna argue over the technicalities. I grabbed a bowl for the ash and I lit one too. Let's start with the things in the lift. My boyfriend is missing. He took the lift 3:15 over 24 hours ago, and we hadn't gotten this note yet. I hadn't heard from him since, and I need to get him back. I barked at him, as if the louder I spoke, the more I could influence his answer. But nothing prepared me for what he had said. His skin turned pale, and his harsh-looking face became more sympathetic as he explained. He's dead, love. Forget about him now. Only one person has ever come back from that lift at that time of night, and it was Prue herself. After witnessing it, those creatures ripping their victim apart. Poor Prue was traumatized. And your boy is gone. Let me go and follow the rules. He was blunt, but I could tell that he felt sorry for me. There must be something I can do, I pleaded. There are things I've heard that can bring those back who are lost, but I've never seen solid proof that they work. It would be irresponsible for me to tell you to go do something that might get you killed too. It's nice here, honest. Just get over him and live the status quo. Sorry if I sound harsh. I don't mean to, but you seem like a decent young lady and I don't want to see you go too soon. I asked about what Miss Hemmings had seen in the lift and if they were sure it happened to all who entered it. I refused to believe that Jamie was dead. There had to be something I could do, and if I knew what I was dealing with, I could be better prepared. It was awful what happened. I wasn't there, but this is what I was told. Little Lila was such a cute little kid. She used to open the door and give me a tip when I delivered the post. She was Prue's granddaughter, and Lila was her son's little girl, and that night, she was staying over for the first time. Prue finally felt confident that she could protect Lila from all the strange things that happened here. But she was wrong. Little Lila had a problem with sleepwalking, and she took a trip into the hallway at 1:30 in the morning. Prue took a little too long to notice the sound she had heard was the front door, and by the time she reached the lift, she saw the creatures dragging Lila's limbs away from her body. She tried to fight them, even killed one of them, but she couldn't save the little girl. I was hysterical, imagining Jamie's fate. What are these creatures? Have you ever actually seen them? I asked. No one really knows what they are, love, and there's something to do with the building and all its quirks. No one's ever seen them elsewhere, and we don't know where they came from, just that they're here. I've seen them a few times over the years, usually when new neighbors have left biscuits down for their cats and dogs, or haven't disposed of food waste or haven't disposed of food waste properly. They're curious little creatures, mostly harmless out of hours. Prue warned you about, but if they're fed, they can become quite vicious, looking for more food. That's why you have to bin all your scraps, or hide them, or pack them, or whatever. Just don't leave them out, and don't use the lift at those times, and you're safe from the creatures. They're a little smaller than humans, but they're a similar shape, and they come with grotesque rodent-like creatures. Restarting. They're a little smaller than humans, but they're a similar shape, and they come with grotesque rodent-like features, and are far larger than any rodent could ever be. Like rodent children, I suppose. They have 2 sharp rows of teeth per jaw and consistently hungry. When they eat, they crunch down in a violent and disgusting way, dripping spittle everywhere, and Prue said that she could hear her granddaughter's bones shatter in those jaws. He went pale at the thought of that, but continued. When they first arrived in the building, there were hundreds. Pause. When they first arrived in the fuck. Background noise. Okay, resuming. Got sidetracked. When they first arrived in the building, there were hundreds, and it caused a pandemonium against the residents. We lost the residents of more than 30 of those individual homes, but those residents fought back and managed to kill all but the strongest minority of them. The creatures were left over and were incredibly dangerous and seemingly impossible to eradicate, so the residents struck a deal that they would be left unharmed and allowed to live in the building in return for the residents' safety at all times. But if anyone wanders into the lift between 11 and 11, if anyone wanders into the lift between if anyone enters the lift between 1:11 and 3:33 a.m., they have fair game. This time frame is the period that the creatures are at their most frenzied, and restricting them to the lift was safer for all parties. God help anyone who encountered them during those hours. They've been here ever since, claimed lots of unsuspecting people avoiding the stairs, but nothing like when they first arrived. A few got put down for not holding up their end of the bargain, but we haven't had an incident outside the lift in years. Count yourself lucky you missed that crisis. Everything's here pretty peaceful right now, and I'm sorry about your boyfriend. I really have to go. I'm late for my round. He scrawled his phone number on a piece of paper and handed it to me. Emergencies only. I don't like being bothered. You can't go. The note said you would help me, I exclaimed. And I will, he snapped back, when there's something I can help with. I can't resurrect your boyfriend, and I don't like being late to delivering the post. I will see you soon, love. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe that he was leaving me after all the information overloaded and the small ray of hope he had lit inside me and then squashed. I'll call the police, I shouted, desperate to feel as if I was solving this somehow. You can try if you want, he sighed, but as he opened the door to leave, it just aggravates the creatures, and it isn't going to bring your boy back. Mr. Prentice hates it when the police come to. If you want to get any sleep in the next week, then not avoid it. Wait a week. Report him missing. Learn to adapt to life here, love, or you'll be dead in days. And with that, he shut the door behind him, and I opened it again. I had so much more to ask, but he was gone. No sight of him anywhere in the corridor. Maybe it was me losing my mind. I might be imagining all these things, but no matter how much I willed it into the note, the note was still there, and Jamie still wasn't. Georgia arrived not long after Ian left, and I, of course, asked if she'd seen him in the corridor to try and reaffirm myself that he was real. But she hadn't. She looked at me worried, and held me as I sobbed, and I told her what these creatures had done. I told her all about what Postman had said about Jamie and the building. I wasn't sure if she believed me. Even as she read the note, she looked skeptical. And if she was skeptical, I wouldn't have blamed her. But she had always been supportive. She sat with me for hours while I just sobbed, heartbroken. I was so conflicted on what to do. I felt insane that I hadn't contacted anybody. But this note had turned out to be accurate so far. And if the postman was to be trusted, then I should wait. Georgia had been my best friend for many years, and she stuck up for me when I was too scared to do it for myself, and had always been the brave one out of the two of us. I felt safe around her, so after hours of crying and despairing at the way my life had changed in a matter of days, I finally decided to take a nap. It was early evening, and Georgia was watching some TV, just there for me if I needed her. And despite the deprivation, I struggled to fall asleep. I tried to imagine Jamie's arms around me, but it came a more painful reminder that they probably never will be again. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity of staring at a damp patch in the ceiling, I drifted off. About 3 hours ago, I woke up, staring at the goddamn About 3 hours ago, I woke up and stared at the goddamn damp patch on the ceiling and could hear chattering in the living room. I jumped out of bed and walked towards it. Georgia was on the sofa with a middle-aged looking woman, both nursing a cup of tea in the matching mugs that Jamie had got me as a move-in present. My blood boiled, but it wasn't their fault. I cleared my throat to get their attention. "Oh, Katie, this is Natalia. She lives upstairs, and we got to chatting, so I made her a cup of tea. I hope you don't mind." I looked at the dark-haired woman on the sofa, drinking tea from my cup, and nodded. Georgia was sociable, idiot, with no understanding of when not to be herself. And I wasn't going to laminate her with it right now. I was her coping. "Of course, hi Natalia, what flat do you live in?" I tried my very best to be polite. I would have to discuss not bringing people into my home mid-tragedy with Georgia after she had left, but until then, I'll be neighborly. "Flat 71, it's so nice to meet you. You have a lovely home," Natalia responded. Her lips curled at the corners into a smile that wasn't replicated in her eyes or the rest of her facial expression. She looked at me smugly with full knowledge that I was aware of the implications of what she had just said. The rules. The flat number. Every now and then, someone would knock at your door claiming to live in one of these flats and ask to borrow some sugar. They will seem entirely average, but you must shut and lock the door immediately. I installed 2 extra bolts just to avoid these people. Prue's warning echoed in my mind, and I couldn't take my eyes off Natalia. Something really was off about her. I looked at George, who sat on the couch next to her, and noticed her sweating. Anyone in the UK knows that it's been hot for a few days, but this was beyond the ambient temperature. Her entire body was dripping. Suddenly, she began to pant. Natalia's eyes were locked to mine, just like the windows cleaner had been. Nothing happened before with the cleaner, except this time the rule had already been broken. She was already in the flat. Georgia started to scream as her skin blistered and charred, and her hair fell from her scalp as the skin flaked and melted away from every inch of her. She was being burned alive without a flame in sight. She scratched frantically at her own melting face, taking into the exposed, raw flesh. The sound a person makes when they burn alive is like no other. That will never leave me. I screamed and no one came to my door. I tried to grab my phone to call the postman, but the wooden surface I had set it down on burned my fingers to the touch and forced me to recoil. She was going to set the whole flat alight. My actions needed to be faster than a phone call. I grabbed a hold of the large knife I had set down the side earlier when weaponizing. I grabbed a hold of the large knife I had set down earlier when I was weaponizing. The handle blistered my fingers instantly, but I didn't care. I needed to get her out now and help Georgia if I could. I ran towards the dark-haired lady, sweat dripping from my brow, the closer I got and plunged the knife into Natalia's throat. She gripped it and fell to the floor. She didn't bleed like a normal human. Her insides were black. She was still moving, and I figured it probably wouldn't be long before she stood right back up and tried again. So I dragged her body into the hallway and ready to bolt the door. As we reached the entrance of the corridor, one of the cats was already waiting. Hissing on her semi-conscious body, I caught her eyes fixated on it as I was dumped her on the floor. I grabbed the cat and pulled him inside, wincing as its skin caused small burns on my lower arms. I shut the door and I watched through the peephole. Natalia got up, held her hand to the wound, cauterizing, and walked off towards the lift as if she hadn't been injured at all. I dropped the cat at that point, but every bit of naked skin it touched throbbed and burned for at least an hour. Georgia hadn't been as lucky as Natalia with injury recovery. I anonymously called an ambulance for her. I couldn't believe it, but she was still breathing. She was badly burned and her life wouldn't be the same again, but she was alive, and for that, I was grateful. It sounds awful, but I left her at the park from across the building with no phone or ID. She's my best friend and I want to be there for her. But if I own up to the involvement in injuries that bad, they'll suspect me. And I already lose the slim chance that Jamie might be salvageable. It doesn't mean that I don't care about Georgia, but she's alive. And I won't believe that Jamie isn't until I see it. So now I'm alone again, in the flat, and conflicted about what to do. I want to leave so badly, but this was mine and Jamie's first home together. And if he's alive, I can save him, and I want him to be here. If he's alive, I can save him, and I want it to be here for him to come back to. And if he's dead, and the postman is right, then I don't know if I can leave this memory behind. There's only one person I can think of that can help me right now. So tonight, I'm going to do some research, hunt down an address, and tomorrow morning I'm going to visit Prudence Hemmings.